Hi folks, in this video we're going to talk a little bit about the discussions feature in the UNM Learn system. We're going to look primarily at how the mechanics of discussions work, with perhaps an occasional comment about how you might use discussions and best practices. If you've used discussions at all, you may have noticed that it's not the best implemented feature in the Learn system. It's a little more complicated than it needs to be. That's why if you're new to discussions, I would recommend viewing this video more than once. Maybe the best approach is to view it, to try out creating a discussion board in your course, and to view it again either while you're creating it or afterwards. I say that because there's a couple of things about discussions that are tricky, and they won't really make sense until you've made a few discussions and possibly held a few of them in your online classes. In this video, you will learn how to create a discussion board, how to create a link to a discussion board, which is essentially how you deploy a discussion board, and how to view discussion board posts and reply to them. So the first thing you're going to do is go to the page in your course where you want students to find your discussion board. So I'm going to go to my course content page. You can see that I have a few modules already set up on this page, and I'm going to set up a discussion for Module 1. So I'm going to want to go into Module 1 in order to do it. So here we are in Module 1. All I have in here currently is this module overview item. And what I want to do to add a discussion board to this page is go up to Tools and then select Discussion Board. So this is going to start the process of creating a discussion board. It's going to take you through a series of screens, and this is the part where it will likely get a little confusing for you the first few times you do it, because there's several screens, and really you're creating two things. You're creating a discussion board and you're creating a link to a discussion board. So that kind of needs to sink in a little bit in terms of you're creating two things, and those two things are related to each other, but they're not exactly the same thing. And working with those two things can be a little puzzling at first. But what we want to do as a starting place is to create a new forum. And so we want to click this button that says Create New Forum. That takes us to the Create Forum page. We want to give our new forum a name. We're going to make this the Module 1 discussion. And the next thing is an important part of creating discussions, and that's to give your students instructions on what you want them to do in this discussion. So you're going to put that here in the text editor, and you may spend some time sort of crafting these instructions for your students. You also have the option of just going ahead and creating your forum and then coming back later to add your instructions, which is really kind of the substance of your discussion board. So it's the part that you'll spend a little time on. So I'm just going to type instructions go here. What I would come back to add would likely be a discussion prompt. What question do you want your students to answer? And then some directions on what you expect from them in the post that they're going to make to answer your question, and also some instructions on how you expect them to interact with other students. So it might be typical, for example, to have them reply to a couple of other students' posts. And if you expect them to do that, that's something that you want to say here. And so you want to be clear in the instructions here what you expect the student's initial post to include and what you expect their replies to other students' posts to include. Some instructors actually provide a model post and reply to show students what they're looking for, and that can substantially increase the quality of student discussions. So after you put your instructions here, you want to scroll down and look at the other settings for the discussion board. You have forum availability settings. You'll notice at the top that it has an available thing. It defaults to yes, and usually that's where you want to keep it. If you wanted to create this discussion board and not have anyone see it for a while, you could certainly switch it to no. And you can also put display after and display until dates on the discussion board. If you do that, you want this setting above it to be yes. So what you're saying with this setting, if you use the display after and display until dates, is yes, I want it to be available during these dates and times. So you can set these dates and times with the little calendar icon and with the little icon that looks like a clock. And once you set these dates and times, you can go down to forum settings. The very top forum setting is something that a lot of people don't know about, but that is really useful. You can set this forum so that students have to post a thread as the first thing that they do in this forum. So they would look at your instructions and they would have to post their response to your question that you post in your instructions before they can see anything else on the discussion board. It's useful sometimes to prevent students from seeing other people's posts before they've formulated their own ideas, their own response, and posted it. So that's a really useful setting. You also have a choice of whether to grade the forum. If you're doing discussions in your course, it is typical to grade the forum. It's often the case that if it's not graded, if there are no points associated with it at all, then there's a lot less student participation in the forum. So typically you would click here and you would give the forum some points. Let's say that I give it 5 points. So you have a few other settings here. This little checkbox that says show participants in needs grading status after every certain number of posts. That can be pretty useful. If your instructions say that you want students to post 1 reply and 2 responses to post by other students, well then you're expecting 3 posts from the student and you may be grading them on whether they've done those posts and how they've done those posts. So you don't really want to see them in your needs grading queue until they've posted 3 times. So you could say, let's change this 1 to a 3. And also important is a due date. You can check this box and use the calendar and set a date and time when you expect students to be done with their posting. Typically, this would be the time that you expect them to do their last post. So in other words, if you're asking them to do 3, they should have done the 3rd one by that time. You can also provide a rubric for the discussion if you like, and you can build a rubric here. It's a good idea to have one so students know what you're expecting of them and how you're planning to assess them. So there are a few other forum settings. We'll scroll down here and take a look at them. These are things that you would not typically change from their default settings. You do have a few things in here that are features and settings that you can use, but typically they're set up the way you want them to be. So there's do not allow subscriptions. You can subscribe to a forum, your students can subscribe to a forum, and that means that every time someone posted to the forum, whoever subscribed to it would get an email. You can decide whether or not to allow that to happen with these subscribe features. If you keep the defaults, then it will allow subscriptions. There are also a few create and edit settings, whether or not to allow file attachments to a post. By default, it allows them, and that's pretty typical. You may be using discussion boards for students to share their work or comment on one another's work, and then attaching something to a post of the discussion would be important. And I think the rest of these features are options that are available if you want to use them, but they're not used very commonly and they're not necessarily things that are appealing to use in a discussion board. So I'm going to go ahead and create this discussion board. I'm going to click Submit. And so this is part of what I meant when I said that discussions are a little bit more complicated than they need to be. It's still taking us through a series of screens, and now it's telling us that we want to create a link to the discussion board. So this is something you want to do. By filling out these last screens, you're creating a link in that module where we all started out that will take students to the discussion board. So that's something you want. And all you have to do at this point, since you've already created the discussion board and it's listed here and it's highlighted, all you have to do is click Next. And that's when it takes you to the screen for creating the link to your discussion board. It will reuse the title that you've already given to that discussion, so that's good. It then gives you some space to put your instructions to students for what you expect them to do in this discussion. And so you would want to put those here. These can be and often would be identical to the instructions that you gave when creating the discussion itself. So you can copy and paste the instructions from the discussion board to this link. So now we're going to scroll down and look at the options. For this link to the discussion board, there really are not a lot. Usually you do want it to be available, but if for some reason you don't want students to see it currently, you could change that to no. And then you have date restrictions. So this link to the discussion board could have date restrictions on it. And you could have it pop into the module where we're adding this on a certain date and time and go away on a certain date and time. So I'm going to leave those blank for now. I have the option of going back later and adding display after and display until dates if I would like to. I'm going to click Submit. And that takes us all the way through the steps involved in creating a discussion board and adding a link to that discussion board to a particular place in your course, in this case, Module 1. So I get a nice little confirmation that this has happened. Success, link Module 1 discussion has been created. And if I scroll down, we'll see that the link has been added to this module. What we've created here is a link to the discussion board. I mentioned that there are two things that we're creating. There's the link and there's the discussion board itself. But this link that we've created is something that we can follow that will take us to the actual discussion board. So in that, you can see the two different things that you've created. You've created the discussion board, which is here, and you created a link, which is back on your course content, Module 1 page. Here's the link. What your students will do is they'll come to Module 1, they'll see your content here, they'll see that there's a link to the discussion board, and they'll click the link and go there. So here we are in the discussion board. Your students are going to come here and they're going to reply to the question that you posted in your discussion prompt. And the way that they'll do that is create thread. They'll give a subject to their post. They'll come down here to the text editor space and they'll type their answer to your question. They have the option of attaching a file. You may not use that feature and they may not use that feature often, but it's there if it's relevant to what you're doing in this discussion. Students can attach files with documents, with video, audio, images, slide presentations, just about any kind of file. And that makes this feature particularly important for topics and fields that call for student presentations, for demonstrations, performance in any of the arts or in foreign language. It makes it possible for these discussions to be rich in multimedia. And so once they've composed their answer, they can click submit. And they have now created a thread in here. Other students would come in and create threads of their own. And they may also reply to posts from other students. So to do that, they would just click the other student's post. They would read the other student's post, and then they can click reply. So that's how you create a discussion board, and it's how your students will participate. Thank you for watching this video. You can check out the other videos in the series by going to the UNM Center for Digital Learning channel on YouTube. Thanks.